Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Rival Recon for the 22-23 Premier League season. With the Reds having played every game they possibly could last time round, securing a domestic double and missing out by the narrowest of margins in the league, can Klopp's side reset and ready themselves again for what's sure to be another intense battle for supremacy in the Premier League? On today's show, we're looking ahead to Liverpool's opening game of the season, which is a 12:30 kickoff away to promoted champions Fulham. So joining me on the pod to share his perspective on what shape Marco Silva's side are in, and how much the Cottagers will miss Carvalho, and how Mitrovic and co will fare this time round in the Premier League, I'm delighted to welcome back Farrell Monk from the Fulhamish podcast. Welcome back, Farrell.
Hi, Harry. How are you doing?
I'm okay. I think, as we were speaking about just before the pod, nowhere near as fragile as some of those England's women players now after the Euros win yesterday. We're talking about the Randy Savage-esque sort of glasses that they were wearing. But yeah, I think perhaps the only sort of slight illness I feel was the fact that it's already a new season and it's come around incredibly quickly. And I think the Community Shield is always that sort of signaler, isn't it? Obviously on the weekend we don't actually end up watching the game, but I think that's the one that lets you know it's right around the corner. So yeah, getting ready to it, and of course you're the first discussion of the season that I've got here, sort of planned for Rival Recon throughout the season. Last time round with Liverpool playing every possible game they could, that was obviously very, very arduous and tough on the podcasters as well as the athletes who were running across the pitch. But I'm really glad that Fulham are back in the league, and we have a chance to catch up again. It's been a while since we last spoke, but before we get into sort of what to expect this season, I suppose, I mean, even actually before we get into sort of last season, sort of winning the championship, I want to go even further back to the appointment of Marco Silva as head coach at Fulham, because obviously the fact that Parker had departed earlier and gone to Bournemouth, who then actually ended up being sort of your direct sort of title rivals. I just wanted to sort of ask you to cast your mind back there and sort of get a gut check for how the fans were feeling when that appointment was made.
Yeah, it was at a particular time when, to put in the context of it, that usually when a team gets relegated from the Premier League, that their managerial situation is usually wrapped up fairly early on in the summer, because usually the manager who was the incumbent in the season previously would have been long gone before the season had ended. But this wasn't the case. So we were there halfway through sort of what would be the sort of preparing for the championship season with no manager in place. And any sort of potential targets, managerial targets probably would have been picked up by that point. So I think a lot of the fans were feeling a bit aggrieved by the fact that Parker had left us there. However, we found ourselves in that situation, and there weren't that many targets being floated around. And I'm trying to sort of, my memory isn't great at the best of times, but I don't really remember Marco Silva actually being on the fans or in the media's radar when he was actually announced as our manager. And quickly, obviously, we, podcasters and fans alike went straight to Google to sort of try and refresh our memory about who and what Marco Silva was about, and probably remembered that he was he had 3 clubs within 1 year, going from Watford to Hull and to Everton, and Everton was probably his highest profile appointment. And I'm sure that yourself and many other Liverpool fans have great joy in seeking out the fact that it wasn't the most successful time in Everton's Premier League spells to date, but it's actually turned out not to be the worst in recent history. Long may it continue at Frank Lampard at the helm, to be honest.
Yeah.
But he quickly set about trying to sort of think about how he wanted to set about and talk about what he wanted this Fulham team, and he definitely wanted attacking mindset of this team. He certainly spoke very highly of the players that were there already, certainly some who were actually pretty much forgotten in the Premier League era. You're talking about players like Odoi, Tim Ream, other players like Neeskens Cabano as well. And he thought, nope, this is my squad. They're the types of players that I can rely upon that Fulham have relied upon in previous seasons. Those are the type of players that we're gonna utilize, and we did to aplomb, and and he did it very effectively.
Yeah, and I was thinking it's a bit of a sea change there in terms of sort of the approach, as you mentioned. I think that one thing I did, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I saw get labelled towards Parker was that he wasn't playing the most thrilling football in the world, or getting Fulham to play the most sort of thrilling football in the world when he was in charge. And Marco Silva, there's been sort of an inconsistent record there with his managerial appointments. I forget who it was. There was that one particular Sky pundit who particularly disliked Silva for some reason. I can't remember who it was, maybe Paul Merson. But really disliked Marco Silva. I was like, why are we appointing these foreign managers, etc. But that's a big shift, right? He comes in, he wants to play a more attacking style of football. And you mentioned there sort of resurrecting, almost pulling players who may have been on the periphery back into the fold. Then, even as you mentioned, not getting that time to actually prepare in pre-season, probably sort of pursue his own targets. You have to really be pragmatic in many ways. How did that team of his start to take shape, and what were some of the sort of the early signs that you noticed that, okay, this side's playing differently and there could be sort of the foundations to build on here?
It can take a little bit of time. The same way that when Parker first had his first full season with Fulham in the Championship, you're quite right in saying that the football was less attacking and less sort of trying to create the impetus to go forward, and and that didn't really shape until after the first 3 or 4 months into the season. And the same pretty much was on Marco Silva. I wouldn't say it was a slow start by any stretch of the imagination. In the first game of the season, we played Nottingham Forest. We drew 1-1, which eventually, not Nottingham Forest, I do apologise, it was Middlesbrough at 1-1, which eventually we thought that Middlesbrough at the time would be one of the teams near the top of the table, and we were fairly happy with what we saw straight away, especially since that our new signing, technically loan signing from Liverpool, Harry Wilson, was starting that day and picked up a goal straight away. And it did take a good couple of months for it to come through, but there were some big results in the way that sort of had along the way that did have the makings of, actually, we've got something special coming here. We went to Huddersfield and won 5-1, who was a team that eventually ended up in the playoffs, and Fulham were down to 10 men at the time for quite some time in that game as well. It wasn't until sort of when you got into the sort of colder months, there was that time there were 3 matches in a week where Fulham scored 19 goals, and it was when things started to really, really kick on. But it was obviously that Marco Silva had probably a bit of luck in the way that the team sort of was able to stabilize as well, because when he took over, like I said, he had all of these players already available to him, and it was only a couple more signings along the way that really helped it go, like the aforementioned Harry Wilson. We also had players like Jean-Michel Seri, who,
they're forgotten.
Who was very much forgotten. He started a considerable amount of games in the Premier League first time round with his big money move, and then obviously went on loan for a couple of years, and now has obviously came back and wanted to embed himself in the team and did so with aplomb. So it was only we really needed a couple of players to sort of really kick the team on. Whereas Parker, when fans don't really sort of think about the context of the situation, when we went back down to the Championship, it was a massive rebuilding process to get the team going again. But it did take some time to sort of embed the style of play that he wanted, which was a more slow-paced, tactical sort of game, which was very much a case of get the lead, solidify that lead, maybe we can catch a goal at the end. That's basically what he tried to take into the Premier League. It was a bit more. Turgid is a word that a lot of fans have bounded around. I think a lot of it was, but I think again it's the Premier League. Like, you're not going to open up teams at will. However, when after Parker left, there was specifically players like Tim Ream. He was very open about the fact that Marco Silva's been very much more, let's be more open. Let's actually utilise the fact that we are a better team than the other opposition, but don't rest on that fact that people say that. Let's actually perform that way. And, we also, with players like Tim Ream and Tosin Adarabioyo, they are ball-playing centre-backs. Let's use them as well. And Tim Ream although he's well into his 30s now, he wants to get the ball forward. He wants to get it quickly forward. He wants to take on their strikers, and he does it. And Silva allows those players to do that. But yeah, again, it did take a little while to come through, but there were some absolute magical moments that showed that this team was going to go far. I think we beat Nottingham Forest 4-0 away from home. Again, a team that went into the playoffs. We beat Reading 7-0 away from home. We beat Blackburn 7-0 away from home, which was just before they went on this magical unbeaten run, which was strange to say that maybe motivated them after their 7-0 defeat by Fulham. So, so maybe if we beat Liverpool this Saturday 7-0, that you'll go on and win the league or something.
That's the impetus that we need. I think, yeah, that's certainly. I'm looking at the fixtures in January, and yeah, as you mentioned, that was a fun few weeks, right? Now 7-0, 6-2, 6-2. I mean, and then a 3-2, a tighter game, but even more sort of satisfying. That's it. I think January and February sort of incredibly strong months there from looking at the results, and sort of probably the meat of the season actually ended up securing the title. And I think when we're looking at games like that, where we see scorelines like that, I think it's sort of brings us on to talking about the players who were key for Marco Silva last season. And obviously we will be coming to Mitrovic because he's a very interesting character, but who are the other players that you saw as sort of integral to, ultimately winning the championship?
I think if we work from the back, it's Tim Ream has been an absolute legend for the club over the since he joined in 2015. It's strange to think he's actually, even though he is held in such high regard, it's strange to think he's actually been at the club for so long.
Yeah, it's a long time.
And he's not, and it's so easy to think, okay, long stalwart championship defender, surely he's just very stable, gets his foot on the ball, just lays it off to the good players, just gets in the way. But that's absolutely not what he's all about. Yeah, he's a great defender and a brilliant tackler and whatnot, but I think that detracts on what an excellent footballer he is. And I think that's what he brings to Fulham's team and the team last year and every single championship promotion team that we've had. And even when we got to the playoffs and didn't succeed, is that strikers don't expect him to be able for this defender to take them on and succeed. And from there, he can beat a man from centre back and launch the teams onto attack. Many attacks start through him, and you just don't expect that to be the case. I watched part of the friendly that Fulham. I was on a train yesterday, so I couldn't really watch all of it. Fulham played in a friendly yesterday, and there's been a lot of murmurings about Tim Ream now because he's 34 years old as he prepared for the Premier League. And I saw him bamboozle two Villarreal strikers on the ball, which you just don't expect. But alongside him, we got Tosin Adarabioyo, who we signed from Man City for an absolute steal at £2 million. Again, tall, commanding centre back, but excellent on the ball, and got a great range of passing as well. Is able to find the opposite winger, and that's very much the sort of basis for the Marco Silva team that built on the success last year. Because we were an excellent footballing team up the pitch, but that all came right throughout the team and starting at the back as well. Other big players, the re-emergence of Neeskens Cabano, who's always been a bit of a cult figure at Fulham, struggled to have a long standing in the team. We'll have these snippets of bits of good form, would come off the bench, get a goal, then maybe have murmurings that he'd get a first team slot for a couple of games and then fade away again. It was only really towards the end of our last championship season when we went up by the playoffs. He was virtually non-existent most of the season, and then went on a scoring run of scoring like 4 in 5 games right at the end of the season and scored in the playoffs. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh yeah, I forgot about him. He's actually pretty good. But pretty much last year he played most of the games and was great. Towards the end of the season he did sort of tail off a little bit, but it was great to see the re-emergence of him. And he's always playing with a smile on his face, and you'll see him featured a lot in the club videos as well. He's obviously a very popular figure in the dressing room. The two newer lads in inverted commas that really came into the team and changed things: Harry Wilson, exception coming off the right hand side, likes to play sort of the inside forward role, allowing the fullback to go in behind while he's sort of influencing things a bit closer to the striker. But I'm sure Liverpool fans know a fair amount of him. He got the most assists last season by quite some distance as
it's
well.
An interesting one with him as well, because I think, just to sort of dwell on Wilson for a second, because I think when people were justifying why he'd moved on and sort of why was this sort of boy not being given more of an opportunity, he had all this pedigree, the young caps for Wales, and sort of the highlight reel free kicks, as you mentioned, that vision seemed to be there, but I'm not sure exactly what it was, but something was lacking for Klopp for him to become a sort of a first team regular. And obviously the standards are really, really high, so it's no shame to fall short of it. But in terms of the player that he actually has developed and actually turned into, you were talking about it there, sort of the main position where you find him and sort of where he was most effective for them. Where was that?
So yeah, mainly he featured on the right hand side, I think almost predominantly. Marco Silva tried a lot of times to play an attacking sort of 4-1-4-1 formation, but that kind of meant that Wilson, when we were on the ball, the two sort of attacking midfielders, which was usually Fabio Carvalho and Harrison Reed, they would sort of almost go into a free role sort of position, but would maintain the sort of right and left areas of the pitch. Whereas we had quite attacking fullbacks, whether it was on the right hand side, either it was Dennis Adoy or Kenny Tete, or later on in the season with Neco Williams, another Liverpool link. They would sort of go right round the outside and influence play behind Harry Wilson, or on that right hand side would be Harrison Reed. It meant that Harrison Reed was often found going towards the byline, and on the opposite side, Fabio Carvalho was on the byline trying to sort of take on what would be, if the opposition were playing a 4 at the back, it would be their centre back, or if they were playing 5 at the back, it would be their right or left centre back. In the sort of, as I referred to, the love handles of the penalty box, it meant that Harry Wilson was able to sort of find a position where the space was, whether that was on the outside trying to sort of get 1-2s with the fullback or Harrison Reed to get in behind them, or basically picking the ball up where they had gone to follow those players to the byline. He might drop a bit deeper to the edge of the penalty box where those players would have vacated to pick the ball up, maybe fire a cross in from deep or get a shot away. And it was very effective from that position. I don't know if Liverpool play a slightly different system. I haven't seen a huge amount of them the last year, but obviously you've got Trent Alexander-Arnold absolutely fizzing in balls from the right-hand side, and that's obviously very, very potent, where you've got Mo Salah just influencing play wherever he is all over the pitch. Whereas it seems that Marco Silva had a very prescribed position for him in attacking positions.
Sure.
And it worked very, very well. It did change slightly throughout the season. I think quite a lot of times it was a case of the fullback earlier on the season would have been Odoi or Tete, and Harry Wilson just sort of playing it in between the two, just trying to find that crossing position, just to be able to get it in for Mitrovic to get ahead on it. But as teams cottoned onto that, I think they changed it to what we saw more of with Harrison Reed coming up further up the field as well. Whether we'd see that next season, I don't know. It seemed to work very, very well. It might change because of the personnel difference. Jean-Michel Seri has now actually moved on upon the expiry of his contract to Hull, quite interestingly. So that means that at the moment it looks like Harrison Reed will drop a bit deeper alongside one of our new signings, Kjell Polinia, which might mean a positional shift for Harry Wilson. It might see him in a more sort of traditional winger position, especially since if our fullbacks are being pinned back a bit more. It might see him trying to take on the opposition fullback a bit more, trying to create just crossing opportunities for Mitrovic. I don't know. Remains to be seen, really.
Yeah, and into the sort of creating opportunities for someone to finish off. I mean, yeah, it's about time that we were going to be coming to talk about Mitrovic, right? 43 goals. It's hard not to talk about that. And it's just a fascinating character in terms of, I mean, I think just to be simple about it, you look at his record when playing in this league, or playing in the Championship rather, and then maybe sometimes found it harder to translate that sort of performance, that sort of aura when he has come up to the Premier League. I mean, just speaking about him, I mean, last season, his complete force of nature, clearly. I mean, why do you think everything clicked so well for him? Was it that the system was designed to get the best out of him, as you were sort of describing there, sort of in any way in which you could sort of get him the right type of service in which he could thrive on? And also, for those who maybe know the name and have seen some of the goal highlight reels, but actually sort of still think, oh yeah, well, he came up and, wasn't too successful when he was playing for a Premier League side or something along those lines. I mean, what do people miss about Mitrovic?
So I think there's an element of the fact that something that we touched on a bit earlier, like in his first season in the Premier League, he did score 11 goals in the Premier League, which is nothing to be sniffed at. It is pretty good. And he's 27 now. And in 2018-19, you're looking at 4 or 5 seasons ago, he was fairly young. So to score at that level, at the highest level of British football, of English football, is pretty good going. And then in a team that was pretty poor, to be honest, and did not fare very well and was not very competitive in the league, under 3 different managers, all trying to implement their own style. And then you go to the next Premier League season under Scott Parker, when he was hardly played in a team that we talked about earlier that was a bit more defensive and a bit more trying to get teams on the counter-attack whilst not creating a huge amount of chances and therefore not scoring many goals. And he didn't play that much. Scott Parker preferred Ivan Cavallero in the centre-forward position because Scott Parker, for whatever reason, thought that we had a better chance with him leading the line, which a lot of fans disagreed with, to be honest, and this person also disagrees with as well. We would have loved to see Mitrovic play every week and score a lot of goals, but it just wasn't in Parker's system. So when you actually look at it on a game minute by minute basis, he's actually got an okay record for Premier League teams that have not fared very well in the Championship, and that's not down to Alexander Mitrovic. But when you see in his Championship record, speaks for itself. It's an absolutely absurd record. And, even the last season, he's now reaching his prime. He's 27 years old. And when you've got a team that's it's not just geared towards getting Alexander Mitrovic goals. There were goals throughout the team. It just sticks out the fact that Alexander Mitrovic scores the most 43 goals in one Championship season. It's always going to draw your attention to that.
I was going to say, if you've got a system that's not designed just to purely get him service and get him goals, and still manages to get 43 goals, you got a player on your hands.
Because if you actually look at a lot of Fulham's goals last year, Mitrovic was central to them, like not just the ones he scored. Not just the ones he scores. He was integral to the play in and around the box. This isn't, make no mistake, he's a very, very good footballer. He can head, he can hit with left foot, right foot. He's getting better at being a target man as well, as strange as it sounds for someone who, comes across as a bit of a lump. He's becoming better and better, especially against a lot of Championship defenders who are there just to stop Route 1 football. If you actually look back at one particular game, we had the away game versus Man City in the FA Cup, although Fulham lost 4-1. You actually look at the goal that Fulham scored, which was scored by Carvalho. Mm-hmm. Mitrovic was central to that. It was a brilliant sort of first time back to goal, right foot in between the full-back and centre-back, very Harry Kane-esque, which eventually led towards the goal. And that just gives you a little snippet of what potentially could happen next year if we're utilising a player of Alexander Mitrovic's standard in our team, and our team are playing well, and we're able to actually create goal chances for him. And I think with Marco Silva at the helm, we'll be able to, if we can keep him fit, which I'm sure we'll be able to, and the players around him are playing with a bit of confidence too.
Absolutely, I'm excited to see what you can do. This sort of new and improved version of him. So yes, I think that's certainly going to be a battle for a hell of a lot of centre halves. Also, really looking forward to him sort of coming up against is it Lisandro Lopez, I think, just purely because there's so much of a narrative already that's been established about the fact that he's not particularly tall. It's just something that I feel like they're going to be, unfortunately, looking for every occasion, even if he does have a good season, which I can imagine he could do. But before we go on to sort of talking about some of the incomings, you mentioned in there a few times, and of course Liverpool fans will want to hear your perspective on Fabio Carvalho. I mean, I've only caught sort of bits and pieces of pre-season so far, but I have to say, as somebody who had a lot of fun, and I know he's not the same type of, I know he's not the same player or anything like that, but as someone who had a lot of time for Coutinho when he was playing for Liverpool, there are a lot of similarities in how they glide about that I have been very much enjoying, to be honest. I think there's huge amounts of sort of finesse that you can see from the guy when he's even in the few cameos that he's had so far, and I'm sure he's going to be loving the opportunity to work with Thiago Alcantara as well, of course. But in terms of the kind of player that he was for Fulham, and sort of the kind of player that you might sort of expect him to develop into, I mean, what were your thoughts on Carvalho?
I think he's a player that's potentially got it all, really. He influences play up and down the pitch. He's got a great engine on him. And I think that one thing that stands out from him that you just don't expect is, considering his diminutive sort of stature and his highlights reel that might actually show, oh, he's a great goal scorer, great with his feet and whatnot. I think that's one thing that you probably fans really cottoned onto and really loved was his tenacity and how much he was able to win the ball in areas all over the pitch. And, when you've got that added into everything else that I've already just touched upon, then you've got a really well-rounded footballer. And especially at the age that he is, and he's already sort of there were matches last season where he was an absolute joy to watch. And at that age, and it wasn't just sort of like little snippets here and there, and you're like, oh, we could have a player here. He was already a player. He was already miles better than opposition players that had 10 years on them who had thought that they'd be able to show that their experience counts for something. But no, he was able just to make them look a bit silly, really. But, I think when you've got that whole package at such a young age, I think that Marco Silva was able to sort of teach the tactical stuff to him, to say, okay, this is what you're going to do in a team. This is how you're going to operate within our system to be able to win matches. And to be honest, that's what he did. He was able to take those instructions, playing that sort of, whether it was in a 10, if we were playing just 3 behind Mitrovic or playing the 4 behind Mitrovic, he was able to play in that sort of like left forward position, and he did it brilliantly. So Klopp has probably got a kid who's got it all and is able to take instructions. So yeah, I'm very jealous of the fact that, but we're also delighted that he's going to go on to bigger and better things, really. It's just a shame it just won't be at Fulham in the Premier League, much like Sessegnon did when he was able to at least have one season in the Premier League. And we kind of know where we are in the pyramid of football. We'd love to be hanging on to these young players a bit longer. I've mentioned 2 just there, but also players like Harvey Elliott,
yeah, of course.
But we want to see these players flourish, really. We sort of like look on them as proud parents, if anything, even though we've had absolutely nothing to do with their development at all.
Exactly, and it could have been worse. He could have gone to United, couldn't he? So I think it could have been sort of a young player sort of going somewhere and dwindling.
If he went to Chelsea, I think that would have broken everyone's hearts.
Chelsea, oh god, yeah, that would have been grim. No, I was mindful of that. The fact that obviously it's sort of 2 of Liverpool's most promising sort of young talents obviously have come from Fulham in Harvey Elliott and now Carvalho, and the fact that actually that they're getting a chance to play together again, I think that's really great as well. It's really cool. You don't tend to see that very often, and you can see that there's clearly an understanding between them, even though there's been a few years since they've had a chance to actually play together properly for sort of a full season or anything like that. So it's going to be very excited to see how he develops. And I think, one thing I have been surprised about sort of looking into his record is I think some people view him as more of just he's a creator, he'll be a creator. Whereas actually, goals are a pretty consistent theme of his record so far. I know he's 19, so we'll see. We'll see into the play he develops. But just moving on to incomings then. I mean, we could talk, you mentioned obviously Jean-Michel Seri departed. Anguissa, who I was really like the look of as well, has departed to Napoli as well. But incomings, as you mentioned, Yapalinha, defensive midfielder from Sporting. Again, that age range of about 26. Andres Pereira, which is an interesting one, I think, from United. Again, 26 as well. And then Kevin Mbappé from Wolfsburg, sort of a right back. And I think there's Manu Solomon as well, who's a left winger who's coming from Shakhtar on loan, I think, from looking at this. One thing I want to touch upon there before you can maybe talk about the individual signings and which roles you thought were really important for Fulham to actually get done this summer after last season, sort of strengthening the squad. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, carry on.
No, I was just going to say that I think one thing that was definitely thrown at Fulham a few seasons back was trying to do too much, right? Okay, you're buying all these players. I think Seri was one of them in that summer, right, where there was a lot of incomings in, and perhaps just too much work to try and integrate that many players. I'm just interested in what you think about the the approach in the transfer market this time round, and then you could talk about, of course, the individual players.
So I think there's been obviously, because of last season, how spectacular it was, they would have been quite easy to rest on our laurels. But a lot of fans already knew that business needed to be done to compete in the Premier League, especially as the gap gets wider and wider, as the money gets bigger at the top of the tree. And there was a lot of talk about where we should strengthen. The first position was almost certainly centre-back. Like I mentioned before about Tim Ream and Tosin Adarabioyo, growing the Championship. We love Tim Ream, don't get us wrong. I would love him to play 38 games next year and we stay up. That would make my heart sing. But reality needs to strike, and the fact
no centre-back yet.
No centre-back yet, and that isn't just Tim Ream and Adarabioyo. Again, I think they would just be about okay in the Premier League, but we don't have anyone behind that at all. Mawson has gone, who hardly featured. Michael Hector gone, hardly featured. Terence Congolo, who we signed like 3 or 4 years ago, has only played like 2 games. Has hardly featured last season as well, and definitely most likely won't play a game at all next year either. So we aren't really left with any senior centre backs. And to be honest, this is probably indicative of the transfer window that Fulham are having. We've known this for a long time. We've known that Fulham were promoted quite early on in the season. You know, you're looking at March, April time, really, as arrogant as that sounds, but that's basically the fact of the situation. And it's very, very different to the sort of pre-seasons that Fulham have had the last 2 times Fulham got promoted. First time around was in the playoffs, so that's already, you've got a condensed transfer window. The last time around was pandemic football, so we didn't actually get promoted until pretty much July, August time. So I think we only had 6 weeks in between the Brentford playoff final and the first game of the season, so which is hardly any time, and massively on the back foot to prepare for the Premier League season. This time around, you're looking at four months or so to prepare, and we're now 5 days away from the first kick of the Premier League season with only 2 senior centre backs. And to mention those players, not to go onto them individually, Kevin Mbabu only signed last week. He only got his first minutes under his belt in pre-season against Villarreal, coming on as a sub at the week yesterday even. So it shows the sort of level of activity that Fulham have had so far. But a lot of outgoings, a lot of players who were on the fringes of the squad. Seri, who was very firmly in the first team squad, with only 4 players coming in so far. Marco Silva was there were murmurings towards the end of the pre-season camp in Portugal, but he was very vocal yesterday in the press conference. He said that I'm sure that the players, he would say, the players that we've got in, yes, I'm absolutely certain that they are prepared for the Premier League, whereas but overall, there's a 16 senior players that we've got going into Premier League season. That is no way to go into a Premier League season. So, but it's nothing new for Fulham Football Club. There's been a lot of discontent thrown at the director of football, which is the owner's son, Tony Khan, who has not been very. He hasn't talked about anything transfer window stuff. He has a wrestling franchise that is his own. He's the Vince McMahon figure of it.
I'm aware.
He talks about it solidly. There's loads and loads of tweets about anyone want to know what the director of football is up to this week, and there'll be a tweet of him being the Vince McMahon figure, asking about who's going to be fighting at their version of WrestleMania or whatever it is, which is all well and good. He can go and do it. That's his thing. But for the director. It's very unique to Fulham. Let's be honest. And it's a serious business these days being a director of football. It's not a Football Manager, Championship Manager 102 thing anymore, where you can just put on holiday mode and just hope that whoever has got in, as the assistant manager will do all the signings for you. But yeah, 5 days to go. It's not looking too bright. However, I do like the signings that we've got in so far. They are quite sensible signings considering. And the thing is though, looking at last season, where we needed to plug the gaps. Yes, we needed a new right back after the departure of Neco Williams back to Liverpool. Yes, we did need another winger, and we've got that in Manor Solomon. Yes, we did need another centre midfielder. We've got that in Paulinia. We need another centre back, that's for sure. We just haven't got it yet. But yeah, that's just only scratching the surface. That's only plugging holes. It's not really filling out the rest of the structure.
Yeah, and I think the frustration's obvious as well. Sort of when you mentioned, as you did right at the start, that it was pretty obvious for a while that Fulham were going to be going up. They've had the time to identify targets and get them in early, because of course all managers love to have them in as early as possible to work with during pre-season. Even if you were to sign an amazing centre back pairing now, it's going to take them some time to actually obviously integrate. So I was looking, and it looks as though that there are offers on the table for a couple of different centre backs: Malang Sarr at Chelsea, Issa Diop at West Ham apparently, and also Yannick Vestergaard, who's not had obviously that great a time at Leicester City since he signed as well. Yeah. Also looks like Bernd Leno is due to come through the door pretty soon as well. I think there was a agreement reached with Arsenal for him as another goalkeeper as well. But yeah, it's hardly ideal. And as you mentioned, yeah, I think I'm a fan of AEW. So well done, Tony Khan. But you need to be doing the other stuff. Like you can't just be talking about Hell in the Cell all the time. You need to be helping out and doing both jobs. I can imagine it's no fun at all having people.
The headlines will write itself on Saturday. It will be Hell in the Cell, won't it?
Yeah. It's just it's a headline writer's dream, I think, unfortunately. But yeah, I think you'd like him to keep a low profile and be as less like Vince McMahon as possible. Especially, I think that's become even more sort of desirable over the last few weeks. Not to be like Vince McMahon.
Absolutely.
Just don't do that in your life. But moving on in terms of sort of what you expect from the season itself, then it sounds like that there's the opportunity to get some more players, and there's still time, but it's not setting you up for success at the start of the season. Silva's being very frank about that as well. Should you get those bodies through the door, and actually Silva has the players at his disposal to begin working with, what are sort of fans' expectations this time around for the season? Obviously the priority being sort of survival and beyond, but what are sort of fans' expectations at the moment? And then also, given the fact that there are absences through injury, there are players still just getting minutes after being signed by the club. That's not an ideal start. How do you reckon that Silva will look to approach the Liverpool game?
I think that Fulham fans have been ultimately scarred by the last two seasons, especially since that we did go into them with the first season with fairly high expectations. The second season, less expectations. I think they're as low as they can be this time around, given what has happened and given what is happening over the summer as well. So anything less than embarrassing ourselves, I think we're on to a winner, really. I do think that a lot of the fan base, I'm not speaking for every single one of them, but I do think that there is a sizable bunch expecting to stay up. I think they look at things like the fact that we have huge backing from the owners. They are spending the money. It's not small sums of money for a club our size, and they do expect them to perform. We do have, regardless of what people outside the club think of Alexander Mitrovic, we do have a very, very good striker at the top of his game in his prime, and they do expect that we are going, the players are going to give him service. Saying that, it could get quite nasty quite quickly if things don't go right straight away. I think Fulham did the right thing about hanging on to Scott Parker as long as possible last year. It just didn't, obviously, there must have been a breakdown between the club and Scott Parker in the off season. I think considering the approach they did before that, where we had 3 managers in the same season with a disastrous spell under Claudio Ranieri in the middle of that. And then if you go even further back to our Premier League season in 2013-14, when we had 3 managers then, and it was a pretty disastrous season then as well, I think the correct approach is to stick to what the person who got you up and the person that knows the players, unless it's really obviously bad. So I think the worst thing that we can do is try and pull the trigger straight away after 2 or 3 months when things starting to look ugly, because we can go down. A lot of the players do love Marco Silva, and if he goes, there's a chance that a lot of the players will go as well. Saying that, my personal feeling is that 17th or higher would be an absolute dream, considering the gap in between the Championship and the Premier League has never been higher. I don't know the exact figures, but it's getting less and less that teams do stay up and continue to stay up from the Championship. We're seeing more and more teams fail when they get to the Premier League, whether it's their first time, second time, third time. So to actually stay up is a massive achievement. I do have to see it kind of pragmatically and say, like, if Fulham get relegated, it's not the end of the world. We do have very wealthy owners. The only thing is that the more money they put in, the more risk they're taking on for themselves, the more likely that they might actually pull out and see no sort of value in their investment. And there are some very, very high profile cases of that happening where owners just say, nope, I've had enough. I'm not going to keep investing money. Fulham posted a £94 million loss this year. That is quite clearly unsustainable, really. It's quite clear that the owner in it is just in it for the asset growth. He's not in it to try and make any sort of money going forward. He's in it for the asset gain, and the only way that he's going to do that is consistent Premier League survival. But yeah, back to the question at hand. My expectations are to give it a bloody good go, really, and try and stay competitive throughout the season, because it's the last 2 times there were flirtings that we might end up having a good go at try and stay up, but it's ended up being a bit of a damp squib. Last time around, it was the January, February time. We were starting to pick up a few points. We were getting some wins. We were being, quite competitive. We were keeping a hell of a lot of clean sheets. I think only Man City kept more clean sheets than Fulham in most of that season, which says quite a lot, actually. Just weren't able to put it in the old onion bag. So when we just couldn't sustain it, just couldn't get those wins, and still end up going down on 31 points, which is nowhere near any competitive amount of points. So hopefully if we can get 36, 37, 40, that'd be great. Pick up some win early doors, that'd be great, because the last 2 times it's been starting the season conceding 3 every game and not scoring any. It's just not a way of things going, and then quickly the fans get in your back, the players start losing confidence. It's just not a way to go. So yeah, hopefully first few games pick up at least 1 win or 2, get the team going, get the fans behind you. That'll be nice.
No, of course, and I suppose that's why it's even more frustrating that they're not giving Marco Silva the best opportunity to do that, in terms of sort of the squad being all ready. So in terms of how you think he'll, given that context, I mean, how do you think he's going to approach a game like a 12:30 kickoff against Liverpool at home?
It's going to be, I don't know what he's going to do, because my heart says he'll stick to his guns about how he wants Fulham to play and say, look, this is the way we play football. We did it against Man City and we more than matched them for a lot of that game. we're obviously now a better squad because we bought in, we'd never be able to attract Pereira, Paulinho, and Babu, Solomon, those players. So we're a better squad now. We're playing a team of similar stature in Liverpool. You'd think that Fulham would stick to their guns. Marco Silva would be like, nope, I think we can compete here and play our football and not just, two banks of four at the edge of our box and try and sort of sneak a draw. The only thing is that we tried that last time round. We got smashed 5-1 by Arsenal, and the season before that was pretty much the same thing. So I think that considering the players that we have at our disposal, maybe it's probably sensible that considering we haven't bought that many defenders in, we've got to rely on our attacking talent to do the work, really. But football's not played in isolation. We have to play the team in front of us, and there's a dearth of attacking talent that we'll be up against. Leave ourselves exposed, and Salah will rip us a new one, or if it's not him, then it's going to be, it'll be, I'm trying to think of another Liverpool player, Fabio Carvalho will end up sort of scoring against us, really. So hopefully if we can just give a good showing of ourselves, maybe get a goal or two, that'll be nice to kick things on. Keep the Liverpool contingent, maybe keep the 1,000 or so Liverpool contingent that's picked up Fulham tickets quiet. That'll be nice. No,
exactly. I think that's one thing, sticking to principles. Yeah, of course, but yeah, I think as well at this time of the season, you don't want to be sort of taking on too much damage. Not that I think that Fulham would. I think Fulham are sort of a side that have shown they can match up sides, as you were talking about with the Man City game, where I thought actually despite the scoreline played very well. And as you mentioned, better players have come into the squad since then as well. But anyway, Farrell, I mean, yeah, thanks as always for sort of coming on. It's great to have you back and actually sort of get insight into sort of the journey that Fulham have been on since, I suppose, since a little bit before we last spoke. And sort of that transition from Parker to Marco Silva, the return as champions, Mitrovic's individual exploits, Tim Ream, who I'm now actually very excited to watch more of it in the Premier League, so I want to sort of check him out as well. He'll be on Player Cam for myself. But before we go, is there anything that you wanted to plug on your end in terms of the pod?
Yeah, so if you wanted to check some of the stuff that we do, so we're at the Fulhamish podcast, Fulhamish pod on Twitter. There's a lot of interesting chatter going on around not just the players but around the club itself. I touched on the stuff about Tony Khan. There's stuff that we're doing. I'm sure that Liverpool fans will be very interested to hear around the ticket pricing fiasco at Fulham. We didn't get a chance to talk about it today, but the match tickets for this weekend at the game is between 65 and £100, which is just absolutely absurd. I'm part of the Fulham Supporters Trust board. We did a survey a couple of weeks ago on the back of that. We've been speaking to the club about it. The results of that will be released shortly, but I can tell you that it doesn't look very good from the club point of view. We've also been talking about, so we did a thing last week with Philippe Auclair, the sports investigative journalist, about the new sponsor, W88, the Asian-facing white label gambling sponsor that Fulham now have, which again hasn't gone down too well with the club itself. So although it looked very rosy on the pitch last season, there's some very interesting stuff that we're putting out at the moment around the sort of general sort of murmurings of discontent around the club and the way that it's being managed. It's quite interesting stuff. It's not just Mitrovic is going to score another 43 goals this year. It's actually stuff that really affects people's lives as well. And hopefully that Liverpool fans, if they want to check that out, it really does sort of influence the world of football as well, hopefully.
No, absolutely. Definitely encourage everyone who's listening to check that out. And I'm just hopeful that you do. I was just happy that you didn't mention NFTs in there as well, because I think that's been the other. Yeah. That's been the other thing. I think Liverpool tried to roll that out last season, and of course, that's fallen completely flat, as many people predicted it would do. Yeah. But there you go. I mean, what do we know? But anyway, thanks for coming on again. And to all those who are listening, I mean, yeah, this is the first episode of Rival Recon for the season, and it's could be a long one again. Let's hope it is a long one again, and hopefully one with a sort of better conclusion in the end. Who knows? But we'll be back again with another episode of the pod ahead of the first Anfield game of the season against Crystal Palace on the 15th of August. So yeah, do check out all the other great content that's coming out on the channel between now and then. But otherwise, we'll see you for the next pod ahead of the Palace game.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.